Good morning. Welcome to CDCT Live. My name is Mike Moore, Practice Development Manager here at Insight CDCT. Today, we are going to be talking about as a service with Practice Director Kent Christensen, as well as Jason Middlebrooks, one of our senior architects, also from Cloud and Data Center Transformation. Jason, Kent, how you doing today?
Doing great.
Doing well.
Thank you.
All right,
Doing good,
glad
Mike.
to hear it. Well, really to get things started today for talking as a service, maybe we could just start with the definition of what that really is. Kent, you want to go ahead and kick us off?
Yeah, it's a great topic. It's a very timely. I think those listening are going to hopefully learn something new. So as a service is, it's kind of a contrast to the way people buy data center solutions today, which would be CapEx. CapEx, I use the analogy, if you're going to buy a house, you have somebody brilliant like Jason, carefully architect exactly what you want for a long period of time, and at some point you say, this is exactly what I need for the long plan. And you pull a trigger and it's a major capital expense and it's a major liability. And you have to take care of it, maintain it, et cetera. That's what most people do with their data center infrastructure. On the opposite side is this concept of cloud consumption. You don't plan long-term. You can do a startup and you can say, I'm going to start here and I'll end there. You don't pay upfront. You pay for what you use. There's more agility to expand and contract, et cetera. And so as a service, in the easiest way of defining it is the partners of ours, the OEMs, are creating as a service offering, which is bringing cloud consumption to your data center.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we've seen it really have an uptick in the past year even. Could you go into some of the factors that are really driving as a service? You touched on a couple there, but maybe go a little bit deeper and see why the market's really driving that way.
Yeah, I mean, people have talked about as a service models, sometimes confused with lease models for a long time. And really, they started taking off at the very end of 2019. Now, we may think of that as the last time, the old normal, whatever. And then in 2020, you would have thought everybody's doing this to preserve cash. And sure, the airlines and the hotels might have said, I'm going to do this because I don't want to consume or use my capital, kind of like being able to rent versus buy. What we're actually seeing is the two primary drivers are organizations. I think Jason will touch on one, but there's many that have a cloud strategy. And in reality, the cloud strategy is evolving, and therefore they need flexibility. And this can be kind of a bridge to cloud. I'm going to put it on as a service, and eventually some of it may go to cloud, but we can plan that more purposefully. And then I think what everything has taught us in 2020 is long-term planning is more difficult than ever. And so at this point, who has a good visibility of what they and their customers, so a lot of our clients have their own internal or external clients, need over the next 3 or 4 years that drive the capital. So that business agility.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you hit on 2 points right there. We actually released a poll to our followers out there about why infrastructure as a service is so appealing. And some of the benefits were, one, topping the charts at 43% was just the scalable consumption of these types of solution, whether it's infrastructure as a service, software, platform as a service, but also creating that business flexibility. And Jason, I think you have an example of a client that used or had those particular benefits in mind when they went to this as a service model. Maybe you could touch on that client example that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. Kent, to point on some of the dates that Kent we're talking about in the years as this has evolved. One of my customers back in the end of 2018, they were were developing their public cloud strategy. They had their own kind of private cloud infrastructure they deployed in multiple data centers, 4+ data centers to be exact, that spread across the US. They were given kind of the directive from the C-level executives within the organization that, look, we're going to, by the end of 2019, we need to have everything moved to public cloud. We're going to get out of the data center space. So they had a ton of storage assets, compute assets, network access assets that they were managing in these 4 data centers. As 2019 progressed, they saw that it was a lot harder to get everything out of their data centers into the public cloud. So then 2020 hit, and they still were trying to get to this philosophy of, let's get out of the data center business. Let's get our assets out of the data center and let's just pay for what we use in the public cloud. Then they started to realize within the middle of 2020 that, well, we can close some of our data centers, reduce our footprint, have data in the public cloud, but we still need some assets on site. Because we have this massive storage footprint, for example, that I've been working with them on for 10 plus years, that we need to keep some of that on site, and that's where, as a service, we started talking to them about that, and it really intrigued them, in that they could actually have their own assets on site, but not do this 3 to 5 year spend, and it would be a kind of a gap between them going from their own data centers to the public cloud.
That makes sense. And so they were trying to get rid of more away from that CapEx model into more of that OpEx to give them that business agility and flexibility with the as a service that it really offers them.
I think Jason
absolutely.
hit another really important point. A lot of what they were trying to figure out is all of their data and the applications that use those. And one of the things, Jason, as we've gone through, they've had some experience of moving data in the public cloud, and it didn't always work great. But one of the things that the as a service, because the storage guys did this first, and the prices are pretty transparent, not like buying capital things where you're negotiating a deal. The price for as a service in these consumption models, which goes into your data center, is fairly transparent. And so it's fairly easy to realize that putting that same data with the same performance characteristics in the cloud is 2 to 3 times more expensive. So that will help them evolve their cloud strategy to maybe everything doesn't go there right away, because A, it's hard, and B, it can be very expensive for certain types of applications and data.
Yeah, and you hit on storage. Is that the main as a service offering that's out there right now, or is there other as a service offerings that our clients are considering in addition to just storage?
Well, I think the storage guys were the most vocal first, because it was pretty easy to say, how do you measure storage terabytes of some performance level? Really fast, how many terabytes? And then you could easily compare that to on-premise and cloud and move it back and forth. But clearly, one of the things that we've seen a huge adoption. And so hopefully this is very beneficial to organizations to think about this. And kind of everybody's getting into it now. So the compute providers, the portfolio providers, Nary is a partner of ours that doesn't say I have an as a service offering today. And so we are seeing an expansion in the market, which is good, because Jason, I think, as you're well aware, this is awesome for my storage. What can you do for my compute and data protection, right?
That's right. Yeah, storage has always kind of been the easy button for this, because one, you can associate a capacity to it, and also different service levels within storage. Like an extreme tier, and which is usually like a flash tier or some kind of performance tier, and then also like just a deep archive tier. That's becoming more. Evolving more in the compute and networking world too, and that's how these other manufacturers and other technologies are going to have to view their as a service, to be able to capture some of the data and be able to offer those different service levels to the customers.
Yeah, that's awesome. So there's a lot of different great flexibility, different types of offerings from different providers out there. And when we're thinking about as a service and our clients, and if anyone's even dipping their toe in the water around as a service right now, what are some of the considerations that they should really be bringing to the table? Who are some of the key stakeholders that may need to have a say in this? Maybe you can elaborate on that. And Kent, Jason, you guys can go ahead and go back and forth on that one.
Well, I'll start off, Ken, on that. As far as with my customers that I've been talking to, it kind of starts from the top level. They have a directive. And then, as we all know, in companies, the executives can't run everything. They need input from the admins and the guys that are the storage admin, network admins, and they kind of know can bring a lot of light to this, how we can get to maybe what the big picture is, in kind of a hybrid way.
That's a great example, and that's a real life example, right? The C-level says we're all going to go to the cloud, and then the people running the applications like, good luck with that. You have no idea of what that would involve logistically to move our mission critical applications to the cloud, let alone cost, right? And so, in this case, and in many of these cases, this provides a bridge that says I can consume like cloud, but I can go and move workloads to the cloud kind of more ad hoc as I need to. I don't have to do it all at once because it's not very realistic. And so people will say, well, do you need to go talk to the CFO? And I think as Jason's saying, oh no, the people we're talking to know what the CFO wants in every organization and is helping the CFO meet the corporate objective. And this is just information that helps people that are running the infrastructure, right? Running the applications and building out the cloud strategies. This is good information to help them do that.
Oh yeah, definitely. And then when we're talking about as a service, what I really want to hit on is some of the main differences when we're talking about CapEx, OpEx, cloud versus on-prem. What are some of the deeper considerations? I mean, why might we see an organization, and is it specific to one vertical? I mean, you gave an example of a financial institution, Jason. Is it primary in finance that this is going to make sense, or does it make sense everywhere?
Well, what we're finding, Insight has a very broad customer base, from very small commercial, to very enterprise like Jason's customer, which is a financial, and many others. And it's a fair question. Everybody says, well, this must just be for the big guys that have these big strategies. And as Jason's pointing out, this client had a massive private cloud strategy 5 years ago. And then he's evolving that into a public and hybrid strategy. And large organizations can do that. We're actually seeing our commercial sellers, people that don't actually spend as much time working with the client and architecting things specific to the client like Jason does, but really are talking to them on the phone of their needs. They're actually having tremendous success of saying, so you're a small company that needs a small amount of storage. What if you didn't have to buy it and keep buying stuff? And this is actually a fairly small client that was buying 50 terabytes. You can start as low as 50 terabytes of storage. And the client said, yes, I am so tired of buying stuff. I just want to run my growing business. In this way, I'm just consuming what I need. And I'm not worried about when do I need to buy more? When do I need to buy new support contracts? When do I need to do this? I'm tired of buying stuff. And so it does absolutely apply to all verticals and all sizes of clients.
That's right. Even the smaller companies can view it as, oh, we don't have to think about, every 3 to 5 years, what's our next purchase going to be and what the size we're going to do. Are we trying to size for the next 3 to 5 years right now when you may have no idea how big you're going to be, especially in the storage world. So it totally makes sense to be able to just put something in place, pay for what you're using, and it be able to scale and grow dynamically to suit your needs.
And right. One other thing is when somebody, maybe a small company says, look, I don't even have IT guys anymore. I've lost that expertise. Right. I don't want to keep investing in that. We will operate it for you. So now it's truly a cloud model. We are finding that 80% of the people don't want to change the way they're operating. They just want to consume it differently. And 20% are saying, look, I want this full cloud operational model. So you not only consume it like cloud, but operate it like I'm using a cloud. And so even though it might be hosted somewhere, or maybe it's in my data center, doesn't matter to us where it's sitting. I don't even want to deal with the infrastructure itself. I just want to run my applications and run my business.
Yeah. And that's a good point about managed services too. I mean, as a service, it implies that you're reducing that CapEx expenditure. You're having that more of an OpEx style model where you can scale as needed. You're not tied to a physical server or the capacities of that physical device on-prem or even sitting in someone else's data center or cloud. I mean, you can actually, you sit on software, you can scale up as needed. So when we're talking about the flexibility of these solutions, I mean, we're living in a hybrid cloud world, right? We have private data center, Azure, Google, GCP. I mean, is there any considerations for as a service that come into play when we're talking about multi-cloud?
Many. So from the multi-cloud point of view, some have a multi-cloud strategy. So for example, a storage provider might say, you can buy my storage in a consumption model, and this storage itself will sit in your data center and you will consume it as a service, right? You can go and look at. I have the same level of service in public clouds, and you can compare those two and move between them if you want to. That's really part of how they offer the technology. I think there is another nuance when somebody says as a service, because what we're finding, especially since IDC and Gartner are both saying that in the next few years, over half of all data center infrastructure is going to be consumed this way. I just want to pay for what I use. I want that cloud consumption model. And so now we have lots and lots of partners, right? And pretty much all of the big ones. And they basically all said, I have an as a service model. But we do break it into two large categories, and I think it's very relevant to the clients. Some of the models are truly as a service, and the pricing is pretty transparent. If it's not obvious, it's easy to just pick up the phone and say, how much is this storage, or how much are these servers, or how much is this, without sizing it. That's a true as a service model. It essentially has a rate card, and it is truly as a service. Most, however, are struggling to get there. That takes a commitment on the part of the person providing the service to say, I'm going to be in this market. Many, even some of the biggest, largest portfolio companies, are still configuring hardware and presenting it as a service. And so when the client engages with them or us, they say, okay, first we need to size it, and we're sizing it based on some sort of hardware configuration, and then we're going to give you a price. And so two things happen there. So as a service, what realistically happens, you say, well, I need to do, Jason gave the example, I need 150 terabytes of Extreme. Well, that's a service definition, right? And then later he says, okay, I'm going to provide this hardware for you. In the other example, they say, hey, I've got a piece of hardware and it can do 150 terabytes of Extreme, and this is how much it costs. In the latter example, you have two issues. One, the client may see that as a lease because it is defined on a piece of hardware, not as a service. And two, because I defined it on a piece of hardware, it's not as scalable. You have the barriers and the boundaries of that piece of hardware. And so, there are more there, and then some of them are moving back toward the true as a service. So we call those, sorry for the long-winded answer, but that's as a service model, service-based pricing versus a configuration model. And a lot of the people in the config model, because it's easier, are trying to figure out how to get to a service model.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, definitely goes to show you the flexibility going more as a service in that config model, definitely. So one of the big things I want to hit on before we wrap everything up is really, if you're thinking about as a service, or if you're getting pressures from your C-level down, if you're more of the engineering architect type, where should we really start? I mean, do we start in compute? I mean, and maybe it's not the technology, maybe it's something else. Where's the best place to start? And we'll start with, how about you, Jason?
I would say the most mature as a service offerings is in the storage space today. That's changing very rapidly this year. As I'm sure Kent will probably touch on that. Other manufacturers in the compute and the networking, I would say the networking has, I know least about the networking, but in the compute world is a lot like the storage. You can offer different levels of service depending on the amount of compute power needed and spun up at any given time. And that's what you're really looking for in an as a service, that flexibility, which is you relate the as a service to a public cloud provider. A public cloud provider, you want to be able to spin things up quickly and spin things up according to the compute or storage or IOPS that you need to perform that task.
Yeah, I think that's dead on. And there's more than just that those providers were the most mature and the first in. And there's a reason for that, is because the hardest thing to do in cloud is storage. And so that's when we do an IDG study, which is on our website, et cetera, and says, hey, clients, what is your cloud strategy? And when it goes wrong, what is the problem? And almost always I had to pull stuff back because I had no idea how much storage costs. It's very complicated. It's very expensive. It's hard to figure out how much you're going to pay in public cloud. And so that's what drove the storage providers to say, I'm going to give them an alternative at less than half the price. But as Jason's pointing out, then the client says, okay, now that I solved the storage problem, my problem isn't just storage, it's bigger. I want to start consuming that way. And so I think to the people listening and considering this is a way to align your data center and cloud strategy to your higher level organization, exactly as Jason was pointing out, that the organization has a cloud strategy. This is just another way to solve the organizational objectives and probably meet your needs. Again, it's not the only way to do it, but it's something that's really gaining a lot of traction because of all the appeal we talked about.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, everything's been kind of accelerated in the past year anyways. And as a service is just one of those many things. Jason touched on networking as a service. I mean, that software-defined WAN, cloud security, SASE, all as a service type models that are being offered for those networking solutions to connect to these compute, to connect to these storage as a service type solutions. So it is amazing the acceleration that we've seen and just blown all those Gartner numbers out of the water if you guys follow Gartner for the different predictions of these technologies. But I think really that's a great place to wrap up. Kent, thank you so much for the insights around as a service. Jason, same to you. If you guys have any questions out there or want to bounce some questions off of us, feel free to reach out. Also check us out on insightcdct.com for more information. You can see previous webcasts and all the information you ever wanted to know about as a service. Thank you so much and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.